morning. My name is Carrie Hardgrove. I'm very happy to represent Team 2 along with my colleagues Alyssa Cardillo, the birthday girl, and Taylor Clare. So what are we talking about when we're talking about high-speed passenger rail? For us, we see this as an opportunity to reimagine America. These railways can connect people to new places faster than ever, yet allows them to still experience the beauty of American landscapes in the process. We think this is a visionary endeavor that is a true investment in our country's infrastructure and will prepare us for the future. But beyond this grander vision, this is a very real opportunity to spark economic growth in difficult times. And we're here and we're excited to share ideas with you for this decision process. Just a quick overview of our presentation today. We're going to go over some key factors that we considered in going through this process, consider our stakeholders and what their interests are in the endeavor, name some of the assumptions we had going into the exercise, talk about our 4 criteria that we think are the most important in this decision process, name some of the barriers and challenges to implementing them in the programs altogether, and then talk about how we envision this implementation process going once we're gone through. So what do we need to consider? This money is coming from the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. The goal of this is the economic stimulus. We need to get people back to work. We need to get our economy going once again. So we need to make sure that how we use these funds is smart and efficient and meets this end. Congress is expecting to see growth, and we want to give it to them. We also need to make sure this is an equitable process. We have a very large country and taxpayers from every single corner of it, and we want to make sure that these programs reach regions in a way that is a fair process while also being transparent. We want to be faithful stewards of the American taxpayer dollars, and we want to be clear in how we're going to distribute these funds and who they're going to benefit the most. We also need to make sure it meets the mission and vision for the Federal Rails Commission. We're here to provide safe and secure rail travel to the American people. We can't do this with so much haste that we forget that this is our #1 priority. So like I said, Congress is one of our big stakeholders. They gave us the money and we have to be smart about how we use it. They expect job creation, economic growth, and a satisfied constituency. We want to make sure that we are thoughtful in how we distribute these funds, but also make sure that we get the money to work as quickly as possible in a reasonable manner. Second, state and local governments. Everyone would like a piece of the pie. We want to make sure that we give a fair opportunity for everyone to be considered in the process, but also that we are doing so in a fair manner that allows them to engage at every level. Second, before construction begins, we want to make sure that we've given thoughtful consideration to the environmental impact these projects will have. We can't just willy-nilly add new rails, pour concrete, and unpaved places before. We want to make sure that we've given this some serious thought and see some environmental impact studies. Last, we're most accountable to the American people. Like we said, we want to show that their government can work for them, we can lead out of a difficult time, and that we can be trusted with their taxpayer dollars.
So the assumptions are very important to enumerate in order to determine where our criteria are coming from. So our first assumption is the sort of field of dreams assumption that if you build it, they will come. If you build railroads, people will use them. Our next assumption is that these high-speed railroads will be more efficient, more cost-effective, and more reliable than the ones that already exist. Also that even more important assumption is that economic growth can be sparked if there's ease of travel, and making it easier to travel means economic growth will increase. And also that metropolitan areas are high traffic areas, so they're the most important areas for such railroads. So our 4 priorities, also known as our criteria, is our first being job creation. This is a stimulus bill. We need to create jobs, so that's our first priority. Our second priority, which also encompasses this, is sustainability. We need to consider the long-term project's success and to make sure those jobs stay in place. Also, our cost-benefit analysis, we need to consider our return on investment of the taxpayer dollars that are being used. And lastly, location. We need to understand which locations will have the biggest impact on jobs. So when considering job creation, we really need to be ready to go. We need those jobs to be done quickly, to be provided quickly and efficiently so we can get the economy going. It's March 2009, post-fiscal crisis. So we want the shovel-ready projects. So we need to consider what the limits of the implementation is schedule. Is it ready to go? Is the contracting done? Is the design ready? Is your environmental impact studies done? This may limit funds to new initiatives, but again, we want jobs to be priority. Also, the effectiveness can be addressed by a sort of ratio of projected jobs to the amount of funds that are being provided, and long-term, what is the current employment rate, and what is your projected employment rate. Next is sustainability. Now for sustainability, there's three factors. There's security, there's safety, and there's long-term viability. So what is the security for riders, and how are you ensuring that? What is the safety? This is a new kind of railroad. It's more dangerous than the previous. So you can do a sort of risk measurement between plane travel and car travel and the risk of this travel. And also long-term viability without grants. Who are your buy-ins after this? This is a stimulus bill. We don't know what direction next year is going to take and how much money will be granted. So what's your support from local and state governments? What are your public and private partnerships like?
So the third factor we're going to talk about is cost. So cost is obviously a return on investment for taxpayer dollars, but it's more than just the cost. It's about the public good that you're getting. So although we talk about how much is this going to cost, such as we want to make sure that these applicants have budgets, not just for this fiscal year, but for projections for other fiscal years. Well, how are they going to get the money to continue the stuff past the grant time? We also want them to do studies and projected reduction in congestion and emissions, because we feel that as part of the cost, we need to look at the environmental cost. And one thing to kind of help make the environmental groups more amenable to this is to make sure that we are seeing a reduction in emissions from this project and things like that. But more than that, the public good is about quality of life improvement. So part of these are you want to increase your ease in your travel, you want to have reliability, and you want to have efficiency. And so that's also part of the cost factor. Location is our fourth factor. So what regions are benefiting from this proposal? Well, let's connect economic centers. We are kind of assuming the fact that there is a demand for this, and so we really want to make sure that we connect these economic centers and have them go across regional boundaries. As such, we want them to have projected demand of ridership, because we know that's been a former problem in the United States. We want them to have traffic studies on congestion and long-term highway need shifting. And we want to have comparative analysis of travel options for same distance, because people are not going to ride the railroads unless it's less expensive and almost as fast as a plane. So we do acknowledge, however, that there are some barriers to the way we like to measure our criteria. For one, a lot of them rely on projections, and anytime you're dealing with projections, you're dealing with the future, which can't always be quantified precisely. You're doing your best guess, basically, based on the data. The other thing we're kind of doing, according to our constraints in staff and resources at the FRC, is that we are relying on these proposals to have comprehensive and reliable data. We won't have time to check all their data to make sure they've given us the right data and that they did it correctly. There are also legislative constraints, because this is the year before midterm elections, and as such, after that midterm election, there's priorities in Congress may change, and that may affect funding or ability to go forward, both at the federal and state and local level. Also, anytime we're dealing with something on this kind of level, you have to deal with state legislative coordination. So you're dealing with across regional boundaries and across states. Anytime you deal with those layers of government, it's more complicated. Policy implications. So we have decided to give priority to shovel-ready projects, and we do realize that this is biased against regions without a legacy of rail travel. But we do feel that this is the best kind of use of the funds over a short amount of time to get the most impact. And some implementation risks. Once we disperse the money, we don't have as much control. It's hard for us to do oversight on our limited constraints and staff. and we have little control of their schedules. So,
And then some of the barriers to implementing these programs once we select them are clearly operational, political, and financial in their manner. Operationally, we don't have these regulations necessarily in place for the safety and security of the rail travel. We need to put priority in establishing these regulations and procedures first and foremost. Next, as Taylor said, we're coordinating across several layers of government and also many different regions. When that happens, there's a lot of complexity involved, along with the need to facilitate strong private-public relationships, given that so many of these railways are owned by private entities. As we touched on this a bit before, but traditionally the United States has low rail ridership rates. We said before that we think, given the opportunity, we'll take advantage of it, and we've seen this demand increase in other countries, such as in Spain, when they incorporate the high-speed rail, and you can see in the different project ideas that have started in California that the want is there, and we think, given the opportunity, that it will be utilized. Politically, again, interfacing with several layers of government is always challenging. We think that this is an exciting opportunity and expect buy-in across the board. However, people change, priorities shift as years go on, and we want to make sure that everyone is invested in some capacity for the long haul, at the very least. Also, lots of states want their own piece of the pie, and we need to make sure that we do this in a fair manner. And there's also some other special interest groups that we need to consider. How will this impact different unions and different interests in regions, and how do you balance those priorities as a federal entity? Financially, who knows what the budget is going to look like each year. This is a significant increase in our funding, and we recognize this as a special opportunity. But we don't know how long it will last, and therefore we don't know how much we can partner for the long haul. So like I said, $8 billion is a lot of money to give out and difficult to do so quickly and efficiently in a thoughtful manner. So we want to make sure that this decision process is very clear. When we send out a request for proposals, we want to make sure we have clarity in our criteria and strict guidelines in how the information received. We don't have the time during this review process to thoroughly shift through different presentations. We need to make sure that the best ones rise to the top in the most efficient manner. We do want to maintain that level of transparency, so if someone would like to reapply, we're happy to share notes, but like we said, the shovel-ready projects are their priority, and if they're ready to go, it'll be evident. Lastly, oversight is important to us. Congress expects it. We want to provide it. So we're hoping to do our appropriations in a more peaceful manner, just to make sure the funds are being used smartly as they go, but also incentivize having the scheduled programs remain on track. Part of them. So with that, we're excited to invite your questions.
Thank you. Questions?
Which stakeholder do you think is the biggest detractor from your proposal?
Detractor? I think state governments tend to be excited about it, but concerned about long-term budget implications. I think state houses tend to be more volatile in given elections, and governors at varying levels of sustainability in office.
Thinking about the decision model, I think it's a very strong model from sort of conceptual level, but turning it into more of a reality for our agency might be a challenge. So how would you go about outlining those next steps for our agency, potentially using Deloitte as a support in that process to make your model a reality?
I think with the criteria that we've outlined, and I'm going to jump in, that once we flesh out specifically the procedures that they think are most important, so we think safety is a priority. We also want to get the money out there, so kind of using Deloitte consultants to increase the manpower in some ways, getting this to happen simultaneously, send out those requests for proposals, give people the time to make sure get them together so that once we do receive them, the turnaround can be a bit faster. I think a lot of it is going to be very strict adherence to the criteria that we're requesting. We don't really have time to hem and haw that much per proposal, so creating those structures is really important.
that's part of why we have the quantitative data, the specific kind of studies that we feel helps to kind of bring forward our priorities, as well as make sure that we are covering the qualitative priority stuff, which is quality of life. So that's what we tried to do with the traffic studies and the projected demand of ridership. Things like that are things that, they will come to us, their proposal will include as something that we can look at, so that with the limited resources, we're we're not spending a lot of time having to go look for that data ourselves.
Do you see that there are any inherent risks in the decision-making process for selecting the applicants?
There is risk. You don't know what areas are. We try to come up with measurements that will determine which areas are most successful and what's most needy. One of our discussions when discussing this was like, what would a railroad really do? How can we connect regionally to the south? And you're in the middle of nowhere in like South Georgia. Is a railroad really important? What's the benefits? Versus how can you benefit a growing city like in Texas, like Houston and Dallas? Those things need to be considered, but it's also hard to kind of get them going if there's a demand in some place like California where they absolutely need it. They already have plans for it.
I think there's inherent tension in saying that our priorities are immediate job creation and sustainable projects. We recognize that, but we think that balancing those priorities is what's going to help this money be the most successful, not just in the next 3 to 5 years, but the next 30 to 50 years.